So just about an hour. I know that seems like a long time for a lot of you, but for me that's kind of common for, this sort of quality render with all that beautiful depth of field. But um, here we go. It looks pretty darn good. This is zoomed in at 50%. A couple things to note was the light caustic rays took a long time to calculate, so I probably don't need as many rays as I had. So I'm going to drop that number in half. Yes, I'm going to do another render. It's hard to ever really be happy. I mean, I can continue noodling this forever, but I mean, I'm sure most of you will want to stop now, but I'm just going to take you through a few little things I like to change in the scene and then hit render one more time. I think the depth of field is a little too shallow. I want to get a few more things in focus, so I'm going to turn my f-stop up a bit. I want to get a little bit more bump map, in my table, so I'm going to turn the depth of that up a little bit. There's still a little bit of noise in this render. I mean, it's pretty darn clean, but there's still some noise in here. So I'm going to even turn my anti-aliasing rays up even higher. But what I do love is a lot of great things. I mean, you can look at sort of the bokeh back here, how that beautiful that's the edge weighting. See these little edges are a little bit more value to those. I love that a lot. Changing the reflections on the table that we did earlier, the diffuse down, making this more chrome. Now we're picking up this background image quite a bit in the reflections. And then that bokeh along the side there. I mean, starting almost in focus here and rolling its way out of focus. I think it looks really cool. I don't love this highlight here, or this reflection. It's probably coming from the environment. I'm not going to change it, but just tweaking your environment, turning it a little bit. It's probably actually this background image. Rotating that a bit, rotating your cup a bit. You're going to totally change what you're seeing reflected and refracted in here. I'll leave it as is right now. Again, I'd probably want to work on that caustic pattern a little bit more, but let's zoom back out to see it full res. Overall, I think it's pretty darn cool. Should probably zoom in maybe a touch on this image. And the only thing that's calling out to me right now is this edge. Again, that's me making a mistake of camera projecting. So I showed you earlier to camera project that background, which was fine. But when you start doing the depth of field, it actually becomes a problem because it needs to blur what's on the outside of the camera when it does the depth of field. And it doesn't have anything. So it's actually returning the right-hand side of that image, because again, when you do the camera projection, anything outside of the camera, it starts to mirror, or not mirror, but it starts to duplicate that image along the side. So we're getting this weird harsh highlight, which is actually this side of the image, due to how we're projecting that image. So the first thing I want to do, yes, we're still moving, is come in here and come into the image itself and change it from front projection. Again, this is on this background image, the BG one we have here. So instead of front projection from the camera, I'm going to default that back to its UV map and then select the proper UV map called texture. And it's going to almost align pretty much how it was before. Because the aspect of my background image, if you look at the image itself, I think it's 4 by 3. The aspect of this polygon is almost the same. In reality, I think we should probably scale up this polygon and Y a touch. You want it to be the same aspect as you want, or else you're going to get stretching. If you notice I stretch my image way across here, it's now going to stretch that image way across the background. And to be honest with you, that looks kind of cool. So it's kind of whatever you want to taste. I kind of like those white lines in there, but if you don't want them, scale your image across, and now you're getting these long, sort of horizontal spans, and it looks pretty cool actually in this reflection right there. And kind of got rid of the hard line that I wasn't liking earlier. So I'm actually going to scale that up a touch, just because I wasn't loving that hard line. And look at it, already that's kind of gone. We're getting a little bit more of this black here, but so by making that image UV, we actually have a lot more room, flexibility to play with this image. If I can move the whole thing over a little bit, bringing those white lines back in, but now that's introducing that highlight or that reflection I didn't like earlier, so I'm going to undo that. So this background's been giving us a few problems, but I mean that's kind of the nice thing of watching this tutorial evolve, is you're kind of seeing the mistakes happen, which is to give you a lot more knowledge in how to adjust your scenes later on in the future. So all we had to do to fix that seam there was make that image Now UV projected. Okay, so that fixed that one thing. Again, I mentioned some long render times calculating the photons. So let's drop that from 5 million. Let's just go down to 2 million for the caustics. So again, let's go to the render node, global illumination, down to the caustics, and change that down to 2 million. And to be honest, it's probably still an overkill, but I'm going to leave it with those high rays right now because I want that clean definition inside of my light caustic itself. The other thing I wanted to adjust a bit was the bump map on the table. So if I just click the table here in preview, that will load its material here. And let's change the bump amplitude from 1 millimeter, and let's just go 1.5. Get a little bit more bump height in that image. Might still not be enough, but now you can sort of see some of those rays hitting in there. Or not rays, but just a little bit more of that bump map coming in. I like it. Just want to read it a little bit more here in those highlighted areas. And next was, let's come to the camera effects. Was I thought the f-stop was a little too shallow. Everything was a little bit too out of focus. Pretty realistic, but I want to bring in just a little bit more. Let's go to f-stop of maybe 9. And that's going to just bring in a little bit more areas of focus in our image. So not the cup is completely out of focus as it wraps around. We'll still keep some focus throughout the glass. And to alleviate some of that noise, well, I hate to do it, but I'm going to turn up my anti-aliasing samples even farther to 512. To be honest with you, 1024 is probably what would end up with. That's what I did in the last render, but that's going to just eat up more render time. So we'll go to 512 here. Hopefully we'll save more of that render time in the beginning from not calculating so many caustic rays. But I mean, it's an evolving process. You could have been happy with the last one. Maybe you don't even want depth of field. Maybe you want to use your depth map that we rendered and render that in post. Who knows? But for me, I like these settings. I like to just refine. I'm not under a deadline. This is a personal project, so I can continue refining, tweaking. Maybe you don't even want a wood texture. You want to throw a different material in now. This is the beauty of doing personal projects, is you're not under a deadline. You have time to refine all these sort of settings. I'm just looking at this now. Once we changed that background, we got rid of that weird highlight I wasn't loving. I already like this better. I can tell we're going to get a little bit more in focus. I hope I like that more. I'm really liking sort of these horizontal lines here, this sort of composition. Again, I think I wanted to zoom the camera in a little bit more, so let's just bring it, touch it. I mean, all we really want to focus in on was that glass. But now that we move the camera in a bit, our focal distance is out of place. So I'm going to come to item mode, click the camera itself. Now we got to kind of refocus our camera. So let's go again. If you activate the move tool, you get this blue handle, and let's pull our focus distance we have here, focal distance really, and kind of put it back to where we had it before. Again, when we zoom the camera in, we actually move the camera forward. We didn't just focus it in with the focal length. We kept it a nice 24 millimeter lens. So we physically moved the camera when we zoomed in, and now we're just going to pull that focus back a touch. I like it. Still looking good. Highlight. And as you can tell, there's actually all these reflections all changed, the refraction all changed. Any little tweaks you do to the camera, you move it just a hair, rotate it just a bit. This is all going to change here. But I think I still like it quite a bit. All right. It's an ever-evolving process, but I promise this will be the last time. So I'm going to hit save. I'm going to hit render. And we'll come back and just look at our final color outputs, look at our render, and we'll just take one last sort of look at the scene before we call it quits. But overall, I'm ready for my final render. I say that by making air quotes with my fingers because I know I'll probably refine it one more time. But for the sake of ending this tutorial now, let's hit render and let's call it a day. So I'll catch back up with you once this guy's done rendering.